If you want to embody and express more of your truth, integrate more of your shadows, and then experience and enjoy the alchemical reaction that takes place when we have a process in which we can call all of ourselves home and we can become worthy and we can become compassionate, we can integrate all of that together and be in unity consciousness with our truth and with the truth of reality, this conversation is for you. My name is Jackson Strong. I'm going to be here with my brother, Zack Blakeney, who was just sitting right here a few minutes ago. And I'm very grateful to be making this introduction and having a very deep, profound, powerful conversation. Zack is the author of the Codex, or the Remembrance Codex. And it is a phenomenal, phenomenal text, a massive text that you can go through for a very long period of time to fully integrate all of it in. And he really, it's all action-packed. There's no fluff. It's systems, it's process, it's detail, it's deep insights into how we are composed through sound, through light, and how we can modify ourselves, how we can improve ourselves, how we can open up our hearts, open up our energy bodies to the fullness of who we really are. And if that's the game you want to play, and you want to stop blaming, shaming yourself or others and step into a place of true receptivity to your whole truth, and be able to step forward into the world with that level of power, that level of passion, that level of peace. Some other great P words: prosperity, passion, pontification. This conversation is for you. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more of these. We're here at Reimagine Ranch, where I'm blessed to be, and we're building out an amazing compound facility and New Earth think tank and providing a profound value for others that are seeking to create freedom in their lives. So if you want to create freedom in your inner reality, we're going to be offering amazing ceremonies. If you want to create freedom in your outer reality, we have housing that's coming available soon and conscious co-working coming available, and also programming and details and systems and methods on how to create freedom in your life on many, many levels. So stay tuned for that. And it's going to be just a little bit of a teaser for now because we're still going through the process ourselves. And we're bringing together world-class teams that know how to get at some of the most profound risks to those on the freedom path and how to create true sovereignty on every important level of life and true resilience. So without further ado, enjoy this amazing conversation with my brother, Zack Blakeney, aka Serai'el. Thank you. Welcome. And this is the first session we're recording here in the new studio at Reimagine Ranch. And the name of this podcast will likely be The Golden Frequency. And so if it's not announced to that yet, then it will be soon. And I'm here with my dear brother, Mr. Zack Blakeney, a.k.a. Serai'el. Or I should say Serai'el, a.k.a. Zack Blakeney, I think. And it's been such a joy getting to know you, man. And super grateful for Trinidad. Thank you for the introduction. And really, really excited to be here. And you've shared some really profound truths from the time that I've known you. And you do really amazing work in the plant medicine world, and now amazing work with the Codex, the Remembrance Codex, which is in a large stack. It's a gigantic text that he's brought together, a gigantic scroll that he's brought together that is an incredible methodology, an incredible process, an incredible insightful system for amplifying coherence, for returning to coherence, remembering who and what we really are, embodying our oversouls. I'd love to hear your description of what the Codex is and how you see it impacting people's lives right now.
So the Codex is a living field, and it is the architecture of return that guides souls into Oversoul embodiment and then eventually back to source. So when we think about the Codex, it is, if we were to say that we're playing a game, and the game that we're playing is Remembrance, well, if you were the architect of that game, you would know the map, the gameplay. You would know the different levels, or what the Codex calls octaves. You would also know the challenges that you would experience at those levels, and you would know the method to move through those levels in a way that not only harmonizes truth, but also doesn't bypass anything that's left to be brought back into wholeness.
Like, well, I don't want to cut you off, but like, what are some examples of the things that usually need to be brought back into wholeness?
Yeah, so we can go through the octaves, and I would just say that the answer, the method, is coherence. It's that simple. But octave 1 happens only after we begin to remember. So the Codex calls before this octave, we are the forgotten self. We've come into this incarnation with the veil of forgetting. And through that, we all know at a very young age, and even as we start to have relationship with this environment in which we know isn't us, but there's something inside of us that says there's something more than what I see in front of me. And normally pressure is what brings us into awakening. You know, if we look at my life, your life, anybody's lives, it's by experiencing what we are not that gives us that polarity to know that something is off, but also guides us back into what's true. So when we wake up, so to speak, we actually enter into this first octave of remembrance, which is that the fractured self speaks. And what that means is that we now become aware that there are masks that we have been playing, that we put on based off protection. And those masks come in a lot of different forms. Typically, it's based off of having to perform our identity. Right? And when I say perform, we can say that that comes from the conditioning, especially in the United States and the Western world, that we need to perform for love and for worth. But it's also a performance. We're playing a character. And because we get tuned into the truth of who we are, it then gives us the wisdom to see these masks more clearly. Now, interestingly, the ego is...
Excuse me just one second. Zach, is that clicking somehow? Can you modify that? Thanks.
So our thirst to be more true still has us grab on to things that are, to a degree, more true, but then are still centered in what we would call the spiritual ego. So I remember just...
That's a particularly sneaky monster. I'm enlightened. I've killed my ego. I'm better than everyone now.
And that is the fractured self, right? So in this, as we travel a long time and we experience the things that we're not, we also pick up these things that we can call traumas or experiences that we were not given the correct format for us to be able to integrate into our wholeness. So we fracture them off. And they're typically fractured off by 4 gateways of memory. So each experience that is incoherent, and when I say it's an incoherent field, is characterized by 1, your voice. So in this moment, and anybody that's listening, think about a moment in which you still feel dysregulate your nervous system, that you still feel some sort of regret or some sort of projected anger towards somebody else. At this moment, your voice was either suppressed, you didn't say the thing that you wanted to say in that moment, or projected, and we've said things that were out of alignment with truth and responsibility. So there's an imbalance there. From there, our body responds, the breath responds, and this is the second gateway of memory, which is the breath, becomes short. Right? The nervous system gets dysregulated, and we start having shorter breath, or breath that isn't aligned with our parasympathetic nervous system.
Can I reflect one epic thing from your process? So, I don't want to interrupt where you want to go with this next, but I'm going through Zach's programs and course, and well, I guess an aspect of it, but I'm going through your processes. And one of the things that you went through is, so we're working with raising money and working with different investors and evaluating who is really in coherence with us, right? Not just, hey, who's willing to give us money, but who's really in resonance with what, our vision really wants to be. And the way that you guided the process of tapping into their heart, their intentions, and then seeing how my body responded and how my breath was either short or not in connection to them, I thought that was super brilliant, man. I loved that. So really just want to respect and appreciate how you're guiding that right now.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, that is the greatest lie detector. Like, if we respond with "this is true," and we relax into truth, or "oh yeah, this is true. Yeah, I really mean that." I'm like, "Oh, sure you do." It's not true.
Yep, and that is the 2 other gateways that have been forgotten in a lot of strategies that are claiming to reintegrate shadow, but really are forgetting about the body's ability to hold on to these incoherent frequencies. So when we suppress our truth, or again, we project it and don't take responsibility, and then our breath calibrates to the distortion, it then starts to lock the energy into our body. So the 3rd gateway is the fascia. And anybody that, if you're actually, as I was saying, if you're thinking about this experience, you could tune in right now to where do you feel energy in your body that feels uncomfortable? Where do you feel energy in your body that is stored in a way that creates a tightness or a contraction? You know, like one guy that I'm working with right now, we talked about a certain experience that he had, and as he was in a trance state, his body like flinched. It goes like that. Like that's the body replaying out that experience. And once you have like this understanding of how the body is replaying out the experiences, the fascia is replaying the character. Then we go to the fourth gateway of memory, which is tone. There's an actual vibrational signature, a resonance to that moment in time. So if we were to look at the entire universe in this way and just look out and say every single pinpoint, every single moment has a vibrational signature in which identifies it as being the experience, then in the repressed experience, that vibration is not in harmony with the fullness, with coherence. So when you look at these four gateways, voice, breath, fascia, and tone, a lot of what happens right now is over-reliance on voice. I need to speak my truth, and breath. So a lot of breath work. And through that, there's a big emotional release for a lot of people. And then there's a story that the mind creates because it wants it to be over. And says, I just released, decades of trauma and generational trauma. And you didn't really release it. You just tuned into the resonance because emotion is energy as well. So it's giving you that resonance. But you've also opened up the wound. You've not given the body the completion so that it can move forward and trust that this part of you is now integrated.
What's your process for that?
Yeah, so these are the rituals that are given through the Codex. That these rituals that come through and you find out, okay, what is the actual truth? What's the voice what did not get expressed? Or if it was overexpressed, what needs to be calibrated back to the truth of the experience? Because now you're in the resonance of what actually happened. Breath, noticing what type of breath pattern is actually going to bring you into harmony with your nervous system. And this is where another thing the Codex gives is that breath patterns are like Morse code for your field. It's a way to communicate with your field. So, for instance, a 6262 breath pattern is called an entrainment breath. This is where when we breathe this way, not only do we come into coherence, but our field begins to entrain, which means it begins to harmonize with our environment. So this could be an environment we've created in our mind, right? Because we're the projector of reality. So if we're back in this experience and what's being projected, in that resonance of where I was breathing a certain way, and now I'm reorienting in that experience, breathing in parasympathetic breath patterns. The soul fragment retrieval breath is a 4-4-8 breath and then 0. So 4 in, 4 hold, 8, and then 0, hold, and then go back. So these are just a couple of different strategies that allow for the field to start reorganizing itself from your breath. So then you would find out, well, what breath would harmonize this? When you find out where it's in the fascia, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, and there's different kind of workers in fascia. One of my good friends, Ronnie Landis, he goes straight into...
Shout out, Ronnie. Love you, brother.
Yeah, he goes straight into the nervous system.
Yeah, with a pickaxe and a shovel.
And there's a place for that. And I've gone through Ronnie's experience and seen incredible releases.
Yeah.
But what the Codex offers is that you don't need to exert extra punishment on the body because it was never the body's fault. The body's actually just looking for the ability to get back into a parasympathetic state, which is the state that you were born into.
Yeah, and if you've got field distortions, you're like treating the symptom, you're not treating the root cause.
Yeah, exactly. And also that distortion comes from a place that there's something wrong with me, and that something wrong with me in the way that we've related in this life is that I get punished for it. So to go so like viscerally, intense into the body when the body's already experienced the trauma. It doesn't need more trauma to release the trauma. It needs your ability to trust that the body can just be safe. So if we're just looking at mapping safety, that's a parasympathetic nervous system, which again, doesn't have to be done through these wave breathing and like big things. There's a place for that, but it can be done with simple breaths that just, again, recalibrate the nervous system into the parasympathetic state. Now, when you're doing this, you'll find that your body most likely will have a shape. One of the better ways of doing this is actually to do this ritual and have a mirror present, because the fragment will show in your body. If you feel like you were rejected, you'll notice that maybe your shoulders start to go down and that you start to feel that heaviness. If you feel like you've been holding a lot of responsibility, you might start to feel that like the hips are really tense. And maybe it just takes doing some downward dogs and some pigeons to loosen the energy. But while you're loosening the energy, you're also then giving it a vibrational tone that recalibrates. And this is where we can go with personalized tones that actually come from the Oversoul field. And the way to be able to do that right now is just by tuning into the field and being able to bring that through in what we could call channel. But that's a later conversation with the actual platform. But just to notice that you can reorient the body, and by reorienting the body into the shape of the parasympathetic state, it now gives the body a new orientation to that moment in time. And then again, the tone. So I'll go back to the tone. These tones are really the vibrational signatures that would harmonize the vibration that's locked in place. And the three most powerful tones that are generalized but also are for everyone are the tones of Om, A, and Ah. Now, what simple tones, right, for us to be able to sit with. And this is the other beauty of the Codex Intelligence, is that it is a field of return. And we can look out into the world and already see that the Codex is, blossoming in different areas of the world. Sitting on top of a mountain or sitting in a monastery and toning Om A Ah is a Buddhist practice. And they do it consistently. And why do they do it? Well, we think they're doing it for, I guess, maintaining peace or some sort of way. But these tones are actually recalibrating the vagus nerve that has been tightened through the stress that we've experienced. And the toning and using your voice is starting to vibrate the vagus nerve back into the fluidity that it was when you were born. Right? Think about your nervous system when you're a baby, right? Before anything happens. And that's actually what the Oversoul uses to tune to your vessel and start to entangle with your vessel to become the fullest expression of who you are. But to talk about these tones, Om is the tone of unity. So when there was all and there was nothing, right, it was just a bass tone of Om, a vibrational resonance of Om. When we go to the genesis of whatever it is that we find ourselves in, right, we can call it the Big Bang in this universe, the next tone that was emitted is A. And A is the tone of light. So when we just tone a strong A, it's actually reorganizing the light in our field. So it's one of the most powerful tones to use in a generalized way. If I was using like this in a ritual, that somebody could be using this and toning this into their body and restructuring the fascia in their body, because it's restructuring the light just through this tone.
What's the connection between the fascia and light?
Well, it is light, right? So we are all light. This is just light that's been organized into matter. So the tone is just reorganizing it at the photonic level, which is, the particle of light, and then starting to reorganize it based off the other three factors, which is you're still saying the thing, which is vibrational. You're breathing at a different vibration. You're now experiencing the fascia in a new way, in a way that is open, or, if we're talking about repressed, open and confident, and then locking that new way of being through the tone into the body so that it stays. So the third tone is Ah, and Ah, A-H, is free will. So in the beginning, Om, unity, Om, A, light, Ah, expansion, right? Allowing that light to have the free will to experience itself in all different ways, because that is what the source creator desires, to know itself in all different ways. Now these are Genesis tones, and it is actually the key to the game, to actually starting the game of remembrance in the vibrational space. So those that I work with, the first thing I give them is what's called a grace field. That when they tone these tones, and they do so with a breath pattern of 626, it is creating a mini pocket dimension of your own field in which you are in a higher degree of coherence, and from that level of coherence, you then start to entrain the memory of who you are naturally. So I know I went two different ways there, and the reason why I said that is because the rituals are very individualized to the person's experience, but this is just the architecture that allows for this to happen at such a fast rate that most people I'm working with are calling it miraculous, because it is. I'm watching people harmonize decades of trauma in a 20-minute ritual that they might do for a week, And in the process, starting to literally feel this incoherent field, this fragment of self, return in, spiral through the field, reorient the field, and then feel that deep level of peace that it's no longer running in their shadow or their subconscious. We can call it the subconscious mind too, but I just call it an incoherent field at that point. So if we look at this from an architectural standpoint, and I'll look at it from the field standpoint, just imagine a bubble. And in this bubble, or you can call it a torus field, right? That's what they call it in science. But this field is actually your soul. And inside of this field that holds your body, all the information of the universe is there. So this is where you hear this all the time. Every bit of information is inside of the body. Well, the body is not the physical body. The body is the field. So we're expanding our awareness out from just what I feel, and we're expanding into sensing into the subtle energies of our soul. And once we start doing that, the coherence, and this is where I'm going to get into some laws that are given inside of the Remembrance Codex, one being the law of coherence, which says that a coherent field will entrain and magnetize a less coherent field into coherence. So as we establish coherence, then over time, we start magnetizing these incoherent fields, or in octave 1, these fragments of ourself to come back into our awareness, the things that have been in the shadow. When they come back into the awareness, then we ritualize it because it's going to be dysregulating. We ritualize it back into regulation, and then that incoherent pocket comes into greater coherence. A way to ground this into something that you can think about is that you could have 1,000 small magnets. And 1,000 small magnets have a very small distance in which it'll magnetize, and the force of magnification is pretty little as well. But if I have one large magnet, all those 1,000 magnets put into one large magnet, well, now I'm magnetizing at a greater distance and a greater magnetic force. So as we're becoming more coherent, we're starting to magnetize these incoherent parts. We ritualize and harmonize them into coherence, and that allows us to move into the second octave of experience.
Well, the thought that arises there is what we were talking about beforehand. And, as above, so below, as within, so without, we are the unity of all that is. We are a fractal of all of it, right? And when we can create that inner reality of doing the shadow work, integrating the pieces, becoming more consciously whole, and we always are, we just think we're this fragmented ego, meat suit, right? And where my mind goes there is how we create this network in reality of others. And as we become more online, as we become more integrated, how we connect with the others that are on this frequency, on this desire, and to come into greater degrees of unity consciousness and have this bio-regional resilience networks, which is something that I'm really getting more and more passionate about. And shout out Blaze and Jeff Reese for some amazing conversations this week about that. And just interested in some of your thoughts on where you see this going, and as we become more coherent in ourselves, how we find the others, and what does it look like when we have more of this nodal network more online?
Yeah, so the first thing, speaking to the principle of correspondence, it's also one of the most overused principles and distorted principles in the spiritual community. One, it's just focusing on one principle, and there are, thousands of laws that the Creator has set forth for us to be able to play this game, right? And the law that I want to bring forward is also the law of resonance. And the law of resonance essentially says that two tones will continue to interact with each other until they return to the same source. And what that means is that there's three responses to resonance. One, there is entrainment, or what somebody might say, I resonate with you. So the resonance or the coherence of my field coheres with another field, and then we find ourselves in this vibrational field of resonance, and then allows for free communication, right? The other way is rejection. So a second one is rejection, which you might say, I don't resonate with you. And that's where the coherence of one is too vast for the other field to be able to cohere to, so they leave the field. The third one is the third response is the response that people forget, which is catalysis, which a coherent field, when interacting with another, will bring forward what is incoherent in that person's field so that they can alchemize it into coherence. But if it gets brought forward and they're not ready to accept it, if they've been taught to let it go, or they taught that's evil, that's bad, they also will leave the field. But if they choose to stay and they choose to harmonize it, then it also raises them up to a certain level of coherence. So when we say as above, so below, as within, so without, if you are wanting to be abundant, right? And then you're looking out into your space and you're like, well, I'm just experiencing so much scarcity. The mind likes to use that feedback and say, well, there must be something wrong with me. I must be too much in scarcity in which I can't actually get what I want. But the truth is, since you're already resonating with abundance, that's not even a question. You're now in a level in which catalysis is being shown to you. You are abundant, and here are the things that are scarce in your field, incoherent in your field. And then instead of pushing those away and saying that those are bad or saying there's something wrong with me, you welcome them in. You see the scarcity. You then find the version of self that doesn't feel safe with holding that abundance, and you harmonize that version of self through the 4 gateways that we just talked about. So this is what is going to happen in the planet, right? So if I'm walking around as a coherent field and I'm just in a space with 20 people, the fields are already communicating with each other. I don't need to say a word. The coherence in my interaction with somebody else, no matter where they are, will start to bring forward either these 3 responses. Some people won't come near me. Some people will come near me towards, curiosity. Some people like to tell me their entire life story and all the deepest, darkest things in front of me. That's catalysis happening for them. And inside of that pace, we're actually giving an opportunity for them to see that in their own mirror and alchemize it so that they come into greater coherence. So now imagine the world. You're walking around as a coherent field. Everybody that you're interacting with, you're either catalyzing, in training, or rejecting. The people that are catalyzing and training are also coming to a level of coherence. So now we're creating a bigger pocket of coherence, right? So now we're collaborating in coherence. And then once that happens, and that collaboration, that community, then starts to have a larger magnetic field, right? That anything that's around it, you don't even know what's happening, but the field is actually catalyzing people around it, and then they're awakening through the process. So in field architecture, this is how remembrance occurs. It occurs from the pioneers, those that are willing to do the work now, to be a stabilizing node for others to follow the same fractal pattern. And then over time, we then find ourselves in a planet, if you imagine the planet, the world, with a coherent field around it. Well, that's the new Earth that we're all resonating with right now.
Okay, so as we do our own integrating work, we connect with the others, mass awakenings can happen, and there's so much data behind that, and mass meditation studies and the effects on reality. And if you're watching this, you're probably pretty in tune with the nature of synchronicities in quantum physics and law of attraction, and how we do have a tremendously powerful role in influencing what reality is.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned how the Creator is discovering itself through us. Mm-hmm. And there's an incredible rant from Alex Jones that comes to mind on when he was on Rogan years ago, and about how God, the Creator, I like to use Creator better, has less like cultural weight on it, because God sounds so like patriarchal, whatever God. Mm-hmm. But the Creator in Jones's rant, he said the Creator doesn't know where the Creator came from. And there's this massive confusion of what it even is. And there's a correlation between that and the demiurge and the Gnostic concepts of this, monster that got created that was separated from source, but it's creating and devouring itself. And we're in this demiurgic soul trap from that theory. So I know I'm blending a couple concepts together, but do you have a familiarity with or a perspective on the demiurgic or Gnostic concept?
Yeah, so I'll just say from the Codex's wisdom, it isn't coming from the parts of what the Codex calls the isolate. So the Remembrance Codex itself is actually describing what's happening in the Oversoul lattice. So if you were to imagine that you have the planet, and then you have this toroidal field that's holding the planet in, and it's weaved consciousness, and that each one of those weaves is one of our oversouls that's actually responsible for creating Earth. And then there's one that's responsible for creating the solar system. And then there's a weave that's responsible for creating the Milky Way galaxy, right? So we can extrapolate it out. That the isolate happened in the loci of the Lyran constellation. And in the Lyran constellation, this would be the origin point for our loci of oversouls and what we're responsible for. And we can get into the base 12, harmonic gates.
Yeah, because that's what the Keylontic perspective believes too. That we're Lyrans, whatever.
Yeah, we're not all Lyrans.
Okay.
I know that by fact. There are Earthborn people here.
Okay.
We can come from, like, our origin consciousness of the oversouls can actually come from there.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at linear time, there are some that were also incarnated in the Lyran constellation and on the planets. That is something we can say is Lyran. The Oversoul field we could also call Lyran because of the origin of the field, but not every Oversoul chose to incarnate in the Lyran constellation. Does that make sense?
Makes enough sense, yeah.
Okay, so I'll extrapolate
It does,
again.
it does.
Okay?
No, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there were these Lyran wars, right? And that's what happened inside of the physical reality. But what caused that was one Oversoul inside of this symphony that had a question. What happens if I go back to source and I lose my identity? I don't want to lose my identity. So in the natural entrainment of going through the codex, and in the end of the codex, octave 10 is the return to source, it said, nope, I want to see if I can do this alone. So the isolate wasn't birthed out of evil, it was birthed out of curiosity. Can I hold my own tone without source light behind it? In the beginning, because there was so small delineation between source light and the separation was not so vast, it did pretty well. But as source's light wasn't running on source's light, it then began to entrain to other beings' fields. And this is what we call extraction, right? So the negative path. If I can't run off source's light, then I need to pull light from other beings so that I can be empowered. And then take that oversoul and then create all the fractals from it. So we can call that the demiurge. We can call that Satan. We can call it Enki. We can call it Prometheus.
Metatron.
Call it, I don't know about Metatron.
Okay, well, from the Keylontic perspective, that is the Metatronic identity as I understand it.
Okay.
It's this false light matrix where you're raised up to a certain point, which also would connect to their perspective on Kabbalah, where there is wisdom, there is love, there is empowerment, but it's not going to source code energy. It is a fractal, it is an isolate.
Yep. Yeah, so this isolate creates all these different threads, and through that, the further away that moment of questioning whether or not, I'm going to lose my identity to where we are now has created what we can actually observably call evil in the world, right? It does not, this isn't bypassing the fact that there are, rapists and child sex traffickers and all the things we see, but these are just different threads of the same pattern, which is extracting power from others so that that thing can continue to exist.
And the loosh harvesting and all that craziness of how mass emotion is created, and you can connect it to sports, you can connect it to all the the adrenochrome disasters and like the really most horrific things that are objectively happening, sadly.
Yep. But the isolate is losing its tone. It's losing its ability to continue to operate through what we're already seeing in the physical realm, which is the transparency that has come over our collective. We now know of Jeffrey Epstein. We now know of child sex trafficking. We now know of the corruption and distortion inside of the United States government. When 30 years ago, if you would have asked me what I thought about the United States, I'd be like, we're the best country in the world because of the conditioning that's been created through the process, right? So the veil is already being lifted. We're already being able to see more clearly, and that alone is what dissolves the isolate. But what I do want to bring forward is just think about that thought. If I go back to source, I'll lose my identity. Think about every single time you've been through a transformational process. The fear is, well, who am I without this identity? It's the same thread woven into our own consciousness. So for us to look out and say, oh, here's all this evil, or for to look out and like judge other people for the things that they're doing, that's really just a fractal of your own fear playing out through your projection.
That's some of the hardest medicine ever. And a dear friend of mine, Theo, was speaking on this about the Wetiko principle, which would be another indigenous perspective on the isolate. And to the extent that we other it is the extent to which we empower it.
Yes.
To the extent that we can own it and say, yeah, I'm all of it. I'm light, I'm dark. If I had been, in Nazi Germany, I could have been swept up in that. If I'd been in all these different horrible situations, I could have been swept up in that, which is really, really hard to look at. And most people would, wave the flag of righteousness, say, oh no, never, I could never do that. But in the wrong environment, horrible things. We're all capable of horrible things.
Mm-hmm. And that rhythmic pattern is played out right now, and maybe coming to an end, but we don't know, in the Palestine-Israel conflict. I mean, if we look at Nazi Germany, if we look at what happened, there was a blaming of a specific group, which we could call the Jews at the time. And now we're looking at the Jews blaming a specific group for disharmony in their space, and then using that to justify genocide throughout that land. And that is absolutely awful.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of the greatest factors that determines sex predators and sex offenders is if they were actually abused in their youth, which is just crazy that we pass on these traumas.
Yep.
And that, just like you said, like what's happening there is an absolute repeat. And, when you get into the deeper layers of what's behind a lot of, what Judaism has become, and the Khazarian influences, if you've gotten into that, or you see the corollaries between the actual Nazis, like behind the scenes, and the Vatican, and getting into some really deep, like intricate layers of how it all weaves together, in my understanding, what we're seeing are the actors in the movie.
Yep.
And it's not the Jews' fault.
In
some ways it's not even like the Zionists, because like the Zionists and the Nazis, they, as we see, they have intense corollaries. And it wasn't until World War II ended that we saw the rise of Zionism and the Mossad and the CIA. That all came out in the 1940s after the Nazis allegedly fell and they allegedly lost World War II.
Yep.
So, we see, and in our own space program was all run by Nazis, and our CIA was all run by Nazis. So it's this, when we really start to have the courage and the creative mind to, like you said, like get beyond these programmed identities of America is the land of this and that. And yes, there's a beautiful ethos here, but there's so many layers of distortion, so many layers of abuse and trauma all wrapped all together. And the fact that we're in this moment of time of unpacking all this requires a really deep grit and a community that can come together with a level of courage to do that. So
yeah, and I just want to speak with zero distortion that the Jewish people are not responsible for the genocide in Palestine.
Yeah,
right? It is.
There's a lot that are in favor of it, sadly, but many that aren't, and love them and thank you. And Shmuley, I love you, brother. Down the street here, I got to recognize those that are able to extract themselves out from that and be like, yeah, no, this is thoroughly fucked.
Well, and to look at it as well, the Nazis were not responsible for the Jewish genocide. It is this cabal that we are alluding to. This strand of the isolate that is hell-bent on still maintaining power over people, still enslaving and manipulating them and controlling them to do their bidding, and creating stories that create confusion of blame and projection that keep us separate. So it's really, again, we're looking at the architecture of the negative path, which the baseline of it is bypassing free will and extracting energy for control and for power.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole demiurgic piece, and all these pieces we're alluding to, like it is seeking to draw from us in order to stay in this reality.
Exactly, that's how it survives.
Right.
But it's power. We're already in. The Codex has returned because we've already reached a level of coherence that it could return beyond the veil. And again, when I say Codex, this is just the consciousness of remembrance. And when we say remembrance, it's the remembrance of ourselves as being unified with Source, not being isolated from Source. And as that continues, and as our coherence continues to entrain, the isolate and the cabal and this adverse architecture, it can't remain, and it won't. And even more, all the fears that we have that we're going to go into a societal collapse. I would say, don't be afraid of the societal collapse. Don't be afraid of what's actually coming. Know that we are guided, protected, and loved by the Oversoul lattice that I could also call what we would consider God. And they're watching and participating. It's not just like watching, it's you. You're participating in the game. And if you really go through the process, and this is why I'm here, to be an emissary for coherence. Because once you become coherent to a certain degree that we can talk about in the Codex or anybody can explore, you become a magnetizing node for the mission that you were called to prior to incarnation. That gets revealed to you through memory. And to extrapolate that out, if we were to say God or Source, Source remembers, Source is Source. So one thing I disagree with Alex saying that God was confused. God has never been confused. God knows exactly what he's doing. God could only
I feel
experience
that.
itself through light. It could only experience itself through polarity.
Yeah.
Right? And God in its infinite wisdom knew that. And also in the design of return, again, we can only return back to what we are by forgetting what we are. So we're just playing in this world of polarity.
Maybe he was describing the demiurge. Because I'm not saying I don't necessarily know what Jones is. I think it's totally possible he's controlled opposition, even though he brings a lot of challenging truth to light. But like that really would be the description of the demiurge, because it doesn't know where it came from. And like Sophia created it and hid it over here and tried to hide it from the world, but then it had creative power.
Yeah,
So,
and even in that story, we could maybe call Sophia the isolate, and even more so, even though it's disconnected from source light, it can never actually be disconnected from source.
yeah, just perception.
Again, it's the perception of separation that it believes is truth, but in that way, it confuses itself.
Yeah.
But memory is our inheritance. And again, if source remembers self to be God, or we can say that, then every pocket of memory that we attain through this process is ourselves being revealed in our truest nature. And again, a part of that in Octave 5 is the actual memory, the remembrance of the pre-incarnate agreement that you had, which is your mission, to be imparted into this world to bring it into coherence. And I say this because my own experience over these last 4 months, I mean, it's been a little bit longer, but I would say 4 months specifically, I chose for coherence to be kind of my North Star. Not perfection, not a timeline, just maintaining coherence, that my heart was open, that my mind was aligned, and that I was open to receiving and open to sacrificing everything that was needed for my mission to come through. And that's how the Remembrance Codex came into the world through me. And now that that's happened in this last month, and I love numbers too. I posted, we talked about this yesterday. It's like without making this up to this point in September, the entire 2025, reaching a degree of coherence that I was ready to receive and also ready to impart the wisdom of the Codex, received $55,550 in just a matter of 31 days. And it didn't happen through social media. It didn't happen through me going and acting like I was something that I was not. It happened through me just emitting the Codex, people resonating with it, then saying the Codex awakening in them, then saying this is exactly what I've been seeking, and then coming into a cohort without me having to sell them anything. They're just like, this is what I have been guided to, and I know I should do this. And here you go. And I'm just like, awesome. And besides that, having all of the investor opportunities and partnership opportunities, I had 2 gentlemen that are founders that ended up giving me shares in their upstart quantum intelligence company that also has to do with the Codex Intelligence platform. And I've never received shares in a company for guiding somebody. I've heard of other people doing it, right? And I didn't ask for it. They were just like, this is what we want to give you. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's a max evaluation of $5 million, over time. I was like, it's not just what I'm being given now, that's investment into the future. So it's coming in such miraculous ways, and it's coming in ways that I am just sitting back in awe. And also another part of me just knows that this is how it's supposed to be. And to be able to fulfill that knowing in the reality and have that reflect has just brought me to deep levels of gratitude. I mean, just crying with not only grief of like, I always knew this would be, but also the crying of gratitude and joy that has just filled my being, filled my field to the point where it's invincible. What is happening is already happened. It is inevitable. And it's such a joy just to be able to sit in that vibration, that knowingness.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, there's a correlated story that comes to mind for me in my recent experience of seeing things that, I had, goals and visions and things that, we're here to do it and this is how it's going to be. And, over the last number of months, piece after piece after piece was just not going right. And I was just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, why is all this stuff breaking? And got to a point of just massive surrender with it all. And, went through a relationship breakup and had to move, and I was bounced between Airbnbs. And I was like, what is this? Like, why are things so distorted? and just went into the deepest state of surrender with all of it. And like you said, being willing to put it all on the altar. And then I got invited to live at a Bufo healing sanctuary for 2 months, and went through the deepest, gnarliest, most beautiful inner work processes there I could ever imagine, and far more. And shout out Marla at the Bufo Healing Sanctuary. If you're looking for Bufo or Iboga or Wachuma ceremonies, can't recommend her highly enough. And now here on this amazing ranch with Zack, other Zack who's off camera right now, and what we're doing here with Reimagine Ranch, working title, but that really feels like home. And, now we're here in this, or we're here in this extraordinary place, and just miracles are coming to life. And so I share that in my own joy and just enthusiasm, and also with the passionate invitation for anyone watching this and listening to this to find the strength to let it all go, and to allow something so much greater than you could imagine possible to come into reality. Because when, as you're describing and as I'm experiencing, there's magic on the other side of that.
Yeah, and just to speak to letting it go in Codex canon, is that you can let go of the story, but you can't let go of the one telling the story. So the story is
what does that mean?
The story is the experience that happened to you. I can use one of my own experiences, for example. So I was addicted to pornography for 16 years. That ended up with, I was married at the time. Once it was brought forward that I was struggling with this, it was really difficult for myself and my ex-wife to deal with this. Again, we didn't have the tools to know what to do. I didn't have the tools to know to not look at pornography when I was 14, right? It's just the way that it was.
It's a cultural cancer. I mean, it's one of the worst things out there. Yeah.
And it was about a month after all had come forward, and she came home. And when she came home, I knew that she was, in a bad mood. And obviously, like at the time, I was anxious attachment with my communication style. She was anxious avoidant. And what that creates is a strong tension of incoherent dynamics. But I knew something was wrong. I kept pressing her. Hey, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. That's what anxious attachment do. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. She didn't want to talk about it. Got to the point where she had locked herself in our closet. And I was just sitting on the other side of the closet door. And, I'm just like pleading with her, don't leave me. Don't leave me. I'm working on this. I want to be better. And that wasn't helping because it was still pressing her into this compressed, pressurized field in which she was ready to pop. Well, the pop was she opened up the door and she screams, "I want to die." And then she starts running for the kitchen, presumably to grab a knife. And I see this happening and I pop up and I get in the door frame and I'm looking at her in her eyes and I'm just saying, please don't do this. Please don't do this. I'll go. I'll go. Now, in that moment, I had to sit with the first realization that the woman that I had pledged my life to wanted to end her life for what I had perceived to be that moment in time, meaning the person I loved the most wants to kill herself because of what I did. And then after the situation diffused, I sit down and I was already in a suicidal place at this point, but then that compounded it even further. It's like, if the person you love the most doesn't want to live because of what you did, why do you think you deserve to live? And as I was sitting in it, I had something really miraculous happen. And this is actually a piggyback on another story, but I'll just say that when I was standing in front of her and I was looking to her eyes and telling her I would go, I suddenly saw a movie of my life, and it was all of the choices that I had made up to that point in which this experience happened. So when I'm sitting on the couch and I'm seriously contemplating suicide at this point, a voice pops up inside of me and says, "Who's watching?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, if you're the one that's, living your life, who's the one watching your life?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know." And I call that divine curiosity, like moments where what I now have known to be my oversoul guiding me into the man that I am today. But it completely reorganized my nervous system in that moment, right? So we talk about these 4 gateways of memory. It was the truth inside of that experience that I needed to hear. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't wrestle with guilt, shame, and regret for the next couple of years when I would think about that situation. But it wasn't about the story. I just told you the story of what happened. I needed to commune with the version of me, that 30-year-old self who didn't know any better, who didn't know that this was going to happen, who loved so deeply and wanted to give his life to this woman and wanted to give her the dream life that she was always wanting to live, only to fail miserably. So I needed to commune with him. I needed to sit at the table and say, I'm here with you. What do you need to say? What wasn't said in that moment that you need to say? And listen to that and witness him. And then give him the words that he's always wanted to hear. Hey, I got you. We didn't know at the time. We know now. What has shifted from that moment? Well, I'll tell you that it's not that I never lied again, but that was the moment in which I chose to not be a liar. That was the moment when I chose not to manipulate, not to control other people, not try to get them to stay when they don't want to stay, not try to force them into situations that they haven't chosen into. That's the wisdom that was attained from that moment. And as I began to commune with that version of myself, and I'm just doing Codex practices, unconsciously at the time, I also visualize him coming into me because he felt safe to come back. Soul fragment retrieval. He felt safe to come back. I was also using the Ho'oponopono prayer as a way to communicate with that space. And as he comes into me, I could feel him where he was in my fascia. And then at that point, I was starting to move in ways that my body was reorienting this fragment inside of myself, and then I felt it lock into place. And once it locked into place, it was just feeling of peace, which is really just this feeling of coherence. And once that happened, I no longer looked at this story that I just told you with guilt, shame, and regret. It was no longer locked in place by that vibrational signature. It was now harmonized into the truth of that experience and how it has empowered me to be the man I am now. So that's what I mean by I was just thinking about all that I have done and how could I be that way. And really that was the fragment that was speaking, that was looking at me and saying, stop fragmenting me off. Stop acting like I didn't exist in that experience. Stop worrying about her. What did it do to you? What did it do to me? And what do I need to hear from myself so that I remain whole? Or that I return to whole. I'm always whole, but I return to the wholeness. That's the truth. So that's what I mean by, again, you can let go of the story. That story no longer holds any sort of emotional weight except for gratitude and love. But I couldn't let go of the storyteller. He needed to come back home to me. And when I did that, by the way, I also instantly felt a shift in the field and then was reciprocated back from her, and she came to me and said, it wasn't your fault. This was a pattern that I experienced with men, a mistrust in men, and you were so much different because I've always been a good man. Like, it's always been my soul. But you were so much different. I thought you would be different, and when you weren't, that disappointment compounded from my previous relationship of emotional abuse and physical abuse, and I realize that now. And that's what happens when we focus on ourselves. When we bring ourselves into harmony, it releases the entanglement of that memory from us so that it amplifies the truth back into them. So if you imagine in field architecture, in this moment, there's me, and then there's her, and then there's this vibrational resonance, which is the experience that we're both entangled into. We share that memory. Our entanglements are the perceptions that are distorted based off of our own view, right? When I took back that part of me, I cut off those entanglements from that memory. And that allowed it to amplify in her field. There was nothing else that she could blame me for because her blame wasn't actually coming into my field. So it mirrored back to her so that she could start to see clearly. And then I don't know how many months it was, at this point it's been a while, but it was at some time afterwards she came to me with that message. So that's what allowed for her to heal, is because I chose to heal and become coherent in my way, which goes back to the architecture that we talked about in the beginning. Right? As I came into greater coherence, it entrained her to come into coherence into that moment, and then we healed together. And I didn't need an apology from her. She didn't need an apology from me. She could see what it was based off of detangling from that memory and reclaiming sovereignty in my own field.
One of the most inspiring, most intelligent people I've met recently has something that comes to mind on this, is how, like, in every moment, every thought almost, we're entering onto different timelines and different aspects of the multiverse. And so as we do this inner work, we becomes reflected into where we land, where other people are on that same frequency. So like what I perceive, and it may just be my fanciful nature, but what I perceive is that that's what's happening, is that we're going to these other levels of the infinity of all that is, and that the deeper that we go inside, the more that they're going to be able to shift so quickly. and we can see how much potential we have to make massive change. And I share that out of my enthusiasm to see the reality in which the deepest work we're doing on ourselves can be reflected instantaneously across the world. And there's so much, fear of that we're not going to be able to extract ourselves out from the system, and the Illuminati and all these terrible, awful people doing these awful things. And it'll take so much to overcome this huge war machine that's just this huge obstacle to overcome. But when I think about things like that, I just get super inspired and thinking that, there's a timeline on which that, the leaders are going to have these awakening moments too. And they're going to sneak off to Peru and have their ayahuasca journey or whatever's going to happen that'll catalyze a massive change in their mind and their heart to make huge leaps forward.
Yeah, and even with that, I just think about, there was a woman who reached out to me at one point when I was running some 3-day retreats, and she wanted to be a part of it. And it was during the middle of this, the genocide that's happening in Palestine. And she's like, well, I'm not going to come to a retreat unless you speak about this, because I'm a freedom fighter. And I reflected back to her. I was like, well, what does me having to speak about it have to do with the freedom of Palestinians? And her reflection back was just, well, if you're not a voice for it, then you're not for it. And my reflection back to her was, it's like, you can't fight for freedom until you're free within yourself. You can't be a liberation, a catalyst for liberation until you've liberated yourself. It just doesn't work that way. Here, your entanglement with witnessing what's happening over there and then having it emotionally charge you into anger, that's what's happening in your field. So it's just showing you the part of you that's angry with you. But if you walk in, and this is getting into, again, not anything that you say, but that your field shifts people. And if your field is shifting people, you don't need to say a word. You sit with them, and then they start to shift. That's true transformation.
100%. And one of the best healers that I know would never call herself a healer, and because it creates the hierarchy. It reinforces the distortion. It's like, no, I need to show up in my wholeness, in my joy, in my vibrance, and allow them to oscillate until, okay, now I feel good.
And for the architecture of that, I know I'm touching on some octaves. Octave 2 is where you become aware of mirror archetypes. And mirror archetypes are fragments that have been created into a bigger field. So we'll just use a tree for an example. If you have the outer canopy of the tree, those are like little fragments of self. Well, they're blossoming from a bigger trunk, like not only the trunk, but a limb that's bigger than that, right? Those limbs are like these archetypes. So we can take healer wounded, for example. If I identify with a healer, and this would be an octave 2 spiritual ego, if I identify as a healer, then my perception is everybody else is wounded. And I'm going to look for people that need healing. But again, I'm just playing out one archetype. The only reason I feel like everybody else is wounded is because I still have wounds that are unresolved in me. I might have healed to a degree that says, oh, everybody else needs this. But then that's creating the mask of the shadow of like, there are still parts of me that are unintegrated. And then what happens is you start speaking to people as if they are wounded. And you also start to attract the person that has that archetype in the mirror, and they come to you and say, I am wounded. But that's a never-ending cycle. Healing, wounded, healing, wounded, healing, wounded. I've run into so many people that have spent their entire life trying to heal from a thing because they keep coming from the space that they're wounded. It reinforces the entanglement of the mirror. So when you realize, and the realization is I have done healing and I have been the wounded, it's no longer projected out into somebody else. It's embodied into what's called a healing node. You then realize that, oh, okay, nobody needs to be healed because nobody's wounded. And then the way I communicate, in the same way that you're talking about, she communicates to people, is you communicate from their wholeness. You don't intertangle with them being wounded. You look at them and say, hey, I realize that you've gone through some experiences in your life that you consider to be traumatic, and you would like to come to a greater amount of wholeness. But are you open to the possibility that this is just a role that you're playing inside of the truth that you're already healed? And if you can come from that space, and I see you from a space of being already healed, I'm vibrating at a resonance, at a memory of being healed. And this is what quantum physics now is proving as retrocausality, which is that the resonance of memory in the future is you're actually remembering the fact that this has already happened because you're resonating with that truth. And if you hold that resonance in your field, then your body will structurally start to reorient to that resonance. And then, again, you sit with people as a healing node, and people begin to heal in your field because you're not trying to fix them. You're affirming to them that they already are healed. Now, this isn't bypassing because there's still the linear time that it takes for that resonance to ingrain. But once that resonance ingrains at the plane of cause, it then starts to recalibrate the field at the plane of effect, which is the body, the mind, and the emotions that are attached to that resonance.
Mm-hmm. And then we got the Mandela effect that we're dealing with now, which has the retro causality to it. And whether or not that has to do with CERN and what they're doing with reality and what CERN even really is, which is a great mystery. And if you've ever seen the opening ceremony of CERN, have you seen that?
I've seen some, I don't know if it's the actual opening ceremony, but I've seen some rituals that are being done at CERN, which I imagine what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's completely off the charts. It's completely crazy, occult, bizarre, just the weirdest witchcrafty looking stuff you can imagine, with goats and just crazy stuff. So, I mean, we're obviously, like, anyone that's living in, like, normie land, where everything is just leave it to Beaver in 2025, like, I don't know how you're still coping and hanging on to that reality right now, because it's so absurdly obvious that something massively strange is going on.
Yeah, I don't attribute it to CERN. I attribute it to, again, your degree of coherence. So,
well, not the overall effect. It's just like CERN is obviously doing something bizarre with reality that goes beyond just finding the God particle. And like entities are showing up in there. People are talking about how they're seeing beings inside this giant portal creator. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's we're speaking to like multiple timelines being intertwined into one, and really it's just multiple resonances. So like instead of taking a timeline, just like look at the Earth and say every pinpoint is a resonance, and that resonance is on a timeline. So if I start to resonate with more coherence in my own timeline, what CERN is doing is still observable to be seen, but it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect what's happening in my world. Those that are intertangled with CERN look at CERN and are afraid of what CERN is doing are entangled with the CERN timeline. Yeah,
being free of fear is absolute, like, job one.
Yeah.
And
that's not bypassing. Like I would just say, like, if for whatever reason it's never going to happen, this is not going to happen. But in the scenario that some people are afraid of, a nuclear bomb is going to be dropped on Austin. Well, I'm not going to say I'm resonating coherence that I can be in Austin and not be affected. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you're not intertwining with that thing, right? So you're not actually in the same field of that occurring. So then you don't get affected in a sense of it disrupting your field emotionally or the way that you think. You continue to know that you are on the path that is made for you, and that's going to attract, out of the now 9 billion people on the planet, the pocket of those that are going to be in resonant with what you have to offer.
Yeah, love that. And we talked earlier about the bioregional resilience and really manifesting these nodes in reality, and how we can find the others. And so if you're listening to this or watching this, and the concept of creating really empowered, really tuned in community resonates with you, then get in touch with us through the links that are going to be in the comments here, because we're bringing together a team of extraordinary souls like this man right here and this other Zack behind the camera here and the others that are on this team, because it is the clearest knowing for me is that the dark side is dangerous and powerful because it is naturally self-organizing. It requires multiple nodes of interactivity to do what it needs to do. It needs diversions, it needs frontmen, it needs double agents. It needs this very complicated thing in order to do what it wants to do. And the good guys, we want to have psychedelic journeys in the forest and raise families and create businesses and create beauty and create art. And we don't naturally think about how we need to find the others to like make this painting that will like have this conspiracy of art. It's just like, no, we want to create. We're in touch with the creator. Until things get nasty enough out there and bizarre enough out there that we like, okay, no, we need to get organized. We need to get connected. And now we're in that point of like the good guys need to get connected again. So very honored to be connected with you and Zack and the rest of the amazing people that are in the Aurea universe right now, because we are so much more powerful than the dark side. It's just not even a thing. If we remember that and if we come together in coherence. So we're stewarding the new world where the dark side or the negative side thinks they can own the new world, and that is the delineation between the two. Yeah, man. We're stewarding a reality that already exists, and we're just cohering or resonating with that reality, and that's the reality of truth. And that's what I mean by once you become to a certain degree of coherence that's measurable through the Codex,
that your reality then starts to be aligned with what we can consider your highest timeline. And I'll offer an equation from the Codex, which is just kind of puts all this together, which is that your quote-unquote highest timeline, and I'm just using that because it's language that's resonant, it's not exactly that, but let's just say your highest timeline equals your personal signal quality, and that would be how coherent and pure or clear your field is, multiplied by network synchronicities. Now, network synchronicities would be the things that are brought to you from your coherence, and synchronicities can be defined by the quality and the quantity, multiplied by distortion penalty, okay? So if I am in total coherence and I maintain that coherence, I'm going to experience the highest quality, meaning the synchronicities that come into my space are exactly what I'm resonating with, and the quantity. There's so many experiences, so many things that are coming into my space, which is what I'm experiencing now. But for every distortion penalty, it might not be the exact thing I'm looking for. It might be, oh yeah, I'm wanting to bring forward this platform, and I'm speaking to somebody that tells me that somebody else is doing something similar. Well, that's a synchronicity. That's letting me know that, hey, this is in the field and that's actually possible. But if I'm fully incoherent, it's the person that's coming to fund it. Oh yeah, I've heard of somebody else doing this and I want to get into a project like this, and yeah, I'm with you, like, let's do it, right? So that's what I'm experiencing, is that the field keeps organizing itself to bring me these type of people around me. And again, not just me in the me, me in the us, because I know that you guys are experiencing it as well. And we're doing that because we're cohering with the pre-scroll agreement. And that's Codex terminology. That prior to incarnation, you agreed to do this thing. And the more coherent you become, the more you just line up with that thing. And on that path is the maximum amount of synchronicities and the quality of synchronicities.
Yeah, brother. We all got to fulfill the contract. Like, we signed up on a contract. You signed on the quantum line, and we got to fulfill the deal. We got to hold up our side of it. And, you know, if you're dealing with stress or trauma or difficult family members or people in your life that, you know, seem out of, why would they be there? You probably chose them too. And yeah. What do you want to say about that?
I've experienced some really beautiful things with my parents. So like when you're just thinking about people that they've never been like out of alignment, it was my own perceptions of like, you know, how they would accept this, because my dad is practicing Catholic. I was raised Catholic. My mom is also still Catholic, but she's more spiritually attuned. And, you know, the Remembrance Codex was transmitted through me. You know, I'm not the author of the Codex. It was transmitted through my Oversoul field. My Oversoul tone or name is Serai'el. And the published book has Serai'el, transcribed by Serai'el, on it, right? And it's the path that Yeshua spoke about. You know, when Yeshua said, "I am the way," it's like, all right, what does that mean? Well, now we have the way that is diagnosable through this resonance on how to travel back to Oversoul embodiment, or we can call it the Avastar frequency. And it's like, here's this book that is telling you what Yeshua has said, but you're still in the middle of believing that just following Jesus and give your life to Jesus is the way, right?
That's Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad buys the book. I didn't even tell my dad I published a book, to be honest with you. I did not tell him that I published it. He can get on social media. Obviously, my sister would tell him, my mom would tell him, but I was like, he's just not going to be able to, like, really, it's not that. I thought in my mind, he's not going to be able to accept this. It still found its way to him. He gets the book. He sends me a picture of it. I just like open up and I'm just like, oh my God, he bought the book. And then of course I get on a call with him and he's like, Zach, I'll be honest with you. This is impossible to read. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm explaining to him, I'm like, look, if you read it and you hear the way that I talk, you know, I have resonance with the way that I talk, but the way that the Codex communicates is in what it's called scroll speech, which is Oversoul language. So the way that I talk isn't exactly that. So I get it, but then he's actually open to me talking about what it is. And then he's still trying to relate it to the Catholic dogma, right? But he's still open to it. And then for my mom's way more spiritually in tuned. And then she texted me the other day and she was like, what's the name that's on your book? You know, and my first thought was like, all right, I'm gonna have to explain to her about changing my name or remembering my name and everything else. And I just type it out. And then she was like, oh, I have a lady here that is interested in your book. I'm like, Mom, you don't even know about what the book is, but this, you know, I mean, it's like the field's organizing itself. So I have a conversation with her yesterday and I'm able to relate it to her. which is that I have this little blonde patch on like the right side of my head. And I've now been in tune to like what my oversoul looks like when I'm this golden blonde being. And it's funny because I'm brown hair, brown eyes here. And I was like, oh, that's like a little bit of my oversoul that was in my DNA that was like a touch. Well, my mom said I was kissed by an angel. So I can use that story. And I'm like, Mom, Serai'el is the angel that kissed me growing up, like when I came through and started transmitting through me this material. And she's just like completely accepting of that because it's related to what she already believed about me anyways, because she knew, right? She knew she was birthing me into the world and this was what I was going to do prior to us coming into this planet. But the acceptance and the love of that. So going back to what you're saying, it's like we have people that we might not think would even resonate, especially our family as we're awakening and coming into remembrance. And what I've birthed through me is so in complete adversity to their belief system that I thought that it wouldn't be accepted. Well, that's okay, Mary.
Hey, relax. Mary, there's nothing out there. Relax. Hey.
I'll give her a pat. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
She needed to be on the podcast. You got jealous, Mary.
It's as if that's enough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I say all this to say, hey, I hope this is an example for anybody that feels like they've had to shut people out of their life. That really you can, with coherence, you can come to a certain level to even know how to communicate and have the hardest conversations because you're communicating from that space of truth inside of you. And that's harmonic truth. That's something that when somebody else feels that, they might not understand what you're saying, but they know that it's true. And that's what I'm just experiencing with my parents in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing when those kind of things come through. And when our oversoul, when our truth, when our subconscious, when our whatever, gets to interpret beyond what our ego thinks the limitations are. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I've had some profound moments in ceremony with that lately. And the chelantic piece comes up. We've kind of been talking about this, and if you know about the chelantic sciences, then you know about some really interesting information and lineage. And if you don't, I really encourage you to check that out. Dr. Sam Lee, huge shout out, really has become a super prominent speaker, and super grateful for him speaking on our stages and being around us. And we're working on some really cool stuff around 1212 and some global meditation ceremonies with Unify, and shout out Patrick and Scarlett for your amazing work with them. And I share all that because there's, at the risk of telling a too complex psychedelic experience, which sometimes can be a little tedious for others that didn't get to experience them, I was listening to an Anahazi musical track and experiencing this incredible like water blessing in the Boga journey. And when I came out of it, this like one of the most loving, just absolutely gorgeous experiences of my whole life, I found out that the song, which was written in Anahazi, was a water blessing. So the fact that my consciousness registered it as that, and it's like this hour-long process. It went on forever. Mm-hmm. It was just rocked my world, and it speaks to both the credibility of the chelantic sciences for me, and also like how much more we're able to tune into than we think that we are in this egoic like little keyhole that we view reality through. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just fascinating. And yeah, would you speak to the connections or lack thereof from your perspective on the Codex work and on the chelantic sciences? Yeah,
well, I mean, speaking about Anahazi,
yeah,
which can you define that for the listeners, and then I can make a relation?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Good question. So Anahazi, from the chelantic historical perspective, was the original human language. Mm-hmm. So pre-Egypt, pre-Atlantis, all of our current constructs. That's what we were speaking. Mm-hmm. And that's the language of the original 12 human tribes. And the biblical correlation would be like before the Tower of Babel, and the languages were distorted. And so there's these interesting threads that kind of weave forward, from the chelantic perspective into, our modern day, which to me gives it a lot of credibility and gives it a lot of weight. Mm-hmm. And my personal experiences continue to really back it up.
Yeah, so in the Codex, the language is called Voa-Ka'el. And Voa-Ka'el is defined as the language of source emanation, or we can call it the language of energy. So it is the language that we speak in soul world. So when we're not in a physical form, this is the language. And this language, when it is used, you're actually speaking directly to the energetic lattice, to the field lattice. And through that can reorient the physical reality. So I can give an example of one and an example of somebody that was working with me. So One tone is called Reitan El Vorah. And Reitan El Vorah is a energetic beam of tone that will stop thought loops from occurring. So I had somebody in a medicine ceremony, and they were going through this really brutal thought loop. And I was just looking at him, and it just came through me. I was already familiar with it from the Codex, and I was like, oh, this is the time to use it. And I just toned it. I was like, Reitan El Vorah. And once I did that, his eyes rolled back, took a really deep breath, and he sat back up. And he was like, what happened? He was like, I'm back. What happened? I was like, I toned this tone. And the tone is defined as being able to stop thought loops from happening. And that's what just happened. And that was like the first experiment with using this language and seeing how it's moving. Mm-hmm. But in the back of the Remembrance Codex, there's 33 different tones, this language that also gives you how to pronounce it, the use case, including from Codex terminology or Codex canon, how Yeshua was able to change water to wine. It wasn't about changing the water molecularly from the physical standpoint. He shifted the field, which then populates the water to shift molecularly, and he did that through the vibrational resonance of his own tone, his own voice that came through, being an embodied oversoul. And then also, I don't know. Again, I don't speak to something that I don't know of. Whether he said what I just said in some other way, or whether or not he did it in his own way of speaking Coherence, this is how this miracle occurred. So inside of the Remembrance Codex, there's the resonator arc, and the resonator is what the Codex calls these former avatars, embodied oversouls on the planet. Yeshua, Moses, Miriam, who is Moses' sister that not a lot of people know about, Mary Magdalene. But then also has a scroll, which is the mechanics of the miraculous. And it says through Codex architecture how these miracles happen by shifting the field, which then allowed for the physical matter to shift. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about that makes sense, because, I mean, it would violate the laws of thermodynamics for you to change the actual matter. But if you can change the cause before the symptom of creation, then that makes more sense.
Yep. The field that creates the matter, you go to that plane of cause, and it shifts the field, shifts the matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, we are in one of the greatest chapters of Earth, the movie ever, and it's daunting. It's could be viewed as scary in certain ways. There's certainly lots of threats to freedom and Palantir and what's happening on so many levels, and there's so many people that are so committed to a negative outcome for humanity. And I want to just empathize with anyone that feels fear, because I've certainly been there. And the fact that these case studies are coming forward, that, these experiences are coming forward, and we're seeing such miraculous shifts in tangible, profound, measurable, and significant ways, that it just gives me so much hope and so much confidence and so much enthusiasm to find the others, and to see others that that are on these frequencies, that want to find places and spaces and time where we can connect in this way. And, Zach over here, thank you again for this, bringing this incredible land together. And anyone out there that's looking for places of coherence, for ceremony, for conscious co-working, for cohabitation, that's what we're building out. And it's going to come together quickly. So really encourage you to get in contact. If this energy, this level of consciousness is for you, then we're here for you too. And yeah, brother, so excited, so appreciative, and what do you feel like leaving us with? What do you want people to? Could you give? You've given some practices and systems, and definitely get in touch with Zach, and we'll get your links and everything in there. But please let us know the best ways to get in touch with you, and then also what's the greatest thing that you want to give to people to experience, even more of the magic that you're coherent with right now.
Yeah. So what's coming through is that you are it, but you're also returning to it. And the Codex is that return path. And it's the path that you're already unconsciously walking. If you've come to this, to listening to this, you're already resonating with the desire to return home. And know that home is not somewhere outside of yourself, that you are home. And that's the deepest journey that we go on, that we feel exiled. We feel exiled when we get here, and then we feel exiled from the people we love. And then we go on this search to try and find belonging somewhere else. But you are where you belong. And when you become safe with all parts of yourself, that is true sovereignty. So when you were talking about to those that are experiencing fear, that's just incoherence. That's an incoherent field. That's not something that is meant to be held on to. It's meant to be harmonized. And when we come from that stance, when we come from a stance that, well, if I truly am the fullness of myself, the wholeness of myself, then there's no part of myself that can be exiled. There's no part of myself that can be left in the dark. All needs to come back and be in coherence with self. And I'll just leave this with a visualization that'll help. If you imagine the physical universe is being held by a coherent field. We call that coherent field God or Source. Inside of that, a star in certain loci can start to resonate in friction, and in that friction come into a star, right? So the friction is what creates this star to appear, and it's a coherent field. And we can call that awakening or remembering. We only awaken or remember through friction, right? Through what we're not. And over billions of years, that star will eventually collapse in on itself and become incoherent into a nebula. But because a coherent field is holding it as the underlying architecture, it allows for the death and rebirth process to happen seamlessly. And not only does it happen seamlessly, but that nebula then creates hundreds of stars. So the rebirth process is something even more grand than what we think is happening in the moment. That's what it's like when you reach a degree of coherence that's sustainable. Emotions that are considered fearful aren't even recognized as that. They arise, and then they're instantly harmonized in your coherence because you have become law in your own field. And that is the path. So know that you, wherever you are right now in your own journey, that you're walking a spiral. That's what the octaves are. It's a spiral back to return. And if you imagine one of those coins, remember when you were young and you'd like throw a coin down a funnel, right? And there is, on the outer edge of when you first throw it in, the centrifugal force and the gravity are pretty even. The gravity's winning, right? But it's pretty even. That's what it's like when you start to remember, but you're still resisting. That centrifugal force is like, I know I'm being pulled into something, and I know it's really great for me, but I want to hold on to what I know because it feels safe. And then when you surrender, you watch that coin start to get into something that is of no return. It starts to spin really fast, and then boom, it's there. So you're walking the spiral already. And if you choose to walk the spiral with surrender, with faith, and with trust, you'll get to what you believe to be the end result, which is you remembering all parts of you at a much faster rate.
Drop the mic, brother. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, Serai'el, Zack, again, man, super appreciate your presence in my life and everything that you're sharing. I find totally fascinating. I know that we're going to be building and experiencing some really, really cool stuff together. So, if you want to say verbally the best way for people to get in touch, and then we'll put all the links in the descriptions and everything.
Yeah, so Codex Emissary is my Instagram, and that would be the most active social media that I'm currently on. When it comes to being able to find the Remembrance Codex, you can go into Amazon, Remembrance Codex Volume 1, if you're interested in picking up the book. And those would be like the fastest ways to get in touch with me. We're in the middle of website development and everything else, so that'd be the spot to reach me.
Amazing. All right, well, from my coherence to yours, namaste. My coherence is your coherence. Well, thank you all for watching. We're going to be doing a lot more of these out here at the ranch, and it's just a joy and an honor, and just super excited to see where this all goes. So thank you for being part of this, and we'll see you at our future events and virtual things. And just super grateful and excited to see this first chapter begin here. So appreciate y'all. See you soon. Take care. Nice, Zack. Well done, brother. Yeah, that was so good.
I've never heard so much truth spoken in my presence.
Let's go. It's okay, Mary.
The truth that is spoken is the truth inside of you.